Greetings, Summoners. Cosmic here, and welcome back to another Battle Spirits Saga video. Today, we're going to be talking about the purple spoilers from Set 3, Aquatic Invaders, as well as give a sample deck list at the end to get you started with the set. Again, meant to be more intro-friendly, new player-friendly to get into the set. And I know, you probably want me to talk about the Evangelion news with the collab both in Set 4 and its own standalone collaboration set. Yes, we are getting the first full collab set in Battle Spirits Saga, but I'm going to leave that for another video because there's a lot to cover. But my God, the Friday update was great. But with that out of the way, let's get into it. Let's talk about these gorgeous, gorgeous purple cards. And of course, we got to start off with Nocturno right up front. Like, that is best SPR of the set, obviously. And then Soul Crush I really like too, just from a thematic standpoint. So once again, maybe you missed the last video or are not keeping up with it, we are starting to get more exclusive Battle Spirits Saga artwork and obviously lore, because it's a new game and it's going to be all new lore, that are having the cycle of the Guardian with the Sanctuary. And we just got in today's Friday update, we're also going to have even more special versions of the Pilgrim and Sanctuary in this block at the Store Championship level and some other events. So they're really kind of bringing this all together. And yes, some of the Guardians are much better than others, but it's still a fun, cohesive build strategy that can be a very easy intro to the game for new players. So I want to give them huge credit for that. But with that out of the way, let's get into it and talk about the purple Guardian, Nocturna. And yes, she does have a revive ability or recursion or, dredge, whatever you want to call it, from the graveyard. So of course, there on the side, I just highlighted, okay, well, what spirits have curse that we might want to loop back, right? And obviously, we're going to talk about the second in command, as it were, for the Nightling deck, which, yes, is a archetype now in purple. But really, we're going to bring back Best Lance, right? 10 out of 10 times. It has curse. You get to draw extra cards with it. It just does everything that you want it to. But this is a card, much kind of like Armor Tree in Set 2, and we did see some more green spoilers that make Armor Tree make sense. But as we get more Nightling-specific cards, which of course will have curse, right? This is a card that is just going to continue to be the key spirit for that archetype. However, what I really appreciate about this is the When Destroyed ability. So now we're also getting core removal that can also ramp into it, because as you're playing this deck, and as you know, so we have one too many 7-drops with 3 reductions in purple, Nocturna can loop herself if you have multiple of the Amethyst Sanctuaries on board, because she has curse. The first one can attack, you trigger the one spirit, exhaust the Nexus, bring back the other one. The second Nocturna can attack, brings back the first one that most likely died, or even if it doesn't, and we still want to get the When Destroyed ability, right? We can just use a Deadly Balance and switch up the attack order. So the one thing I will say, as I was building the sample deck at the end, there's actually a lot of like random big brain plays that you can do. So I appreciate that purple is very quickly becoming this, oh, we have weaker spirits and we have Death Touch. And we do very straightforward things like, ooh, Curse and Rotting Swamp, right? Very obvious combo. But now you can start to see how more of these cards are coming together and really play off one another in a very beautiful way. So I don't think the Nightling archetype is there quite yet. We do need like one more set of support to round it up, but it does feel like a lot of this first year is just like building blocks for these various archetypes and how they're meant to be played off one another, which is fine. I think Set 3 obviously is a huge step up from Set 2, which is all we could have asked for. But I think Nocturna overall isn't there quite yet, but I do appreciate that it is bringing the Nightling archetype on board and does quite a bit actually for what you can be looping back and giving a different play style to purple, which I think was ultimately very, very important. So overall, okay card. It's obviously the key spirit for its deck that it wants to build. So you have to give it a passable note, at least for that regard. But how good will the Nightling archetype actually be in the end remains to be seen. Moving on from there, we have the Vampire Duke Vadigo. And this is, again, we have the Nightling archetype that is just going to continue to be important. It is a 5 cost with 3 reduction, which is really important because you need to be able to get these spirits onto the board. It has curse at 1, 2, and 3, but then the other part of this, right, we're talking about this Nightling archetype, is the level 2 and level 3 ability. So when one of your Nightling spirits reduces your opponent's life, select one of your opponent's spirits, place 1 core from it into their reserve. Does not have to be exhausted or anything like that, which we're going to talk about later, which it matters. So now we're getting this more like core burn strategy. Yes, it does go to their reserve, but then it's like core control where you can strip it off and kill their spirits. And because they all have curse, you're now setting up this board that is like, look, you can block this guy, he has curse, and you're going to die. If you don't block him, you lose a life, and you probably lose a spirit, right? So I really like how this is building all together. And then also, as I was going through and building the deck and looking at different Nightling cards, I also noticed that Dark Queen Guinevere from the Tournament Pack promos is also a Nightling. So now, yes, she doesn't doesn't have Curse because that would have just been far too good. But now we do have another When Spirit or on attack ability, right? That we just want to turn it sideways anyways. And this could be like our second attack. So your first Nightling with Curse goes through, clears the way, and then you're always threatening, okay, well, Dark Queen can either kill something, and then if you block it, maybe it gets one of the other Nightlings to go through, and then the Curse trigger still happens, or the Nightling who had Curse trigger effect still happens, and you burn another one, right? So there's this really interesting like attack pattern that you can build off of now, and because we're going to certainly see more Nightlings in the future, I really think this is a card that could shine quite well depending on what we get in set 4. So again, because it has Curse, yes, it has to have a lower BP thresholds, and I really do like the level 2 and 3. It's going to combo very, very well with the Nexus that we're going to talk about later that I think can surprise a lot of people. Is that going to be better than like just good old core control as we move into this new format? Probably not, but not everyone wants to play a super slow, grindy control deck, right? Sometimes you just want to play a proactive mid-range list that is going to be able to target your opponent's board, both from a curse strategy, a core control strategy standpoint, when we talk about the Nexus later, and just have the ability to get recursion on these spirits. So again, the Nightling archetype coming all together, I think these are all going to be core pieces of it, or I should say at least Duke and Nocturna. Obviously, they are like the match made in heaven for this deck, but we'll have to see how good it is overall. But at a minimum, you're playing for this one, and you're playing for Nocturna if you're building that deck, right? It is we were playing Nightlings. This is what we start with these 8 cards. Moving on from there, we have Costume Artist, which, yes, is a Nightling, okay, but is meant to go with Shadows or the yellow-purple Nemesis list that we've previewed on the channel. A lot of people are talking about, a lot of people are excited about. And this is one where I just like wish it would have had the Shadow archetype tag so we could use things like Abandoned Guillotine. Not that we're playing Abandoned Guillotine anyways, but like just give this a little bit more anyways. But at the flip side of it is, it does have Curse, so you can loop it back. There are things that you can do with like Lamrack still because you're able to sacrifice something, draw a card, bounce it back to your hand. So I get it. It's fine that it's a Nightling and it could go into that deck. But again, at the end of the day, right, you can sacrifice the Nocturna to get the effect. I get it. But at the end of the day, it's just going to be better in the purple-yellow list, so the Nightling tag does not matter whatsoever. So at that point, like, if we can make it matter slightly, right, give it to Shadows. And again, I know someone will say, well, with Duke, it's a Nightling, so if it connects, I know, and it still like checks that box, but for what it does for that archetype, as you're like, we're going to be building out the deck at the end, as I mentioned, it's a very intro-friendly list, but you'll see it there, versus how insanely better it is in the yellow-purple Shadows deck, I got to give it to Shadows. But again, maybe we just need an early curse drop that allows us to cycle through the deck and help us find those Sanctuaries or Nocturna cards. That could be fine too. But overall, I think this is definitely one of the best cards out that Purple got of the set because of what it can do for other decks. And it is probably like just okay when you think about what it means for Nightlings. But again, we could get more Curse when destroyed Nightling, had to put that all together, spirits in the future. So I was already excited for this card. It's something that is already going to see play in a number of like currently existing lists. So that's fine. We'll just have to, again, wait and see the disclaimer of where does Nightling go? And then, of course, where does Nightling go? Well, we have the Tri-Metal Bat, right? Because why not just have more cheap Curse spirits to play? This one is quite literally important just because it comes back off Nocturna. You can play it for 1 and put 1 Soul Core on it to give it Curse, and then it has a Nightling tag, so it works with Duke. Really don't need to say much about this card. You play it because you're playing the Nightling deck, and it checks the box. The 2K, I realize, might not be that exciting depending on how much like Ritual Fire or Burning Forces still get played, and 4 for 3 can feel kind of bad, but at the end of the day, if you're putting this together where you're just getting all these recursion triggers, you just care that it comes in for 1 cost and put 1 core on it, and it swings with Curse and can probably kill something else, right? One way or another. That's all fine. So, again, cool for the Nightling deck. Probably unplayable otherwise because we have other Curse spirits that we want to be using. You know, Agilveil at the end of the day, but then Agilveil doesn't have anything that it cares about with typing-wise. So that's one of the considerations you have to make. Are you doing purple good stuff the deck, or are you doing purple Nightling the deck, and then you're building these cards into this central strategy that you're working towards, right? Like this plus Duke plus the Nexus we'll talk about later all go very well together and all very same when it all happens. But is that better than just, again, traditional core control or just like Mordred mid-range, right? Remains to be seen. But I'm still at least excited and appreciate the fact that they do have a, hey, here's this entire deck that goes together in this set and is much more straightforward for players to pick up. Go run with it, right? Because that's a very easy way to build locals. Moving on from there, the second archetype in set 3 for purple is serpents. And yes, there I do have a list of just all the serpents that we have in set 1 and set 2, and then of course set 3. And I truly love this card. I think it is just a beautiful, beautiful card, top to bottom. Love this dude. Again, all exclusive artwork, which is great as well. But what's really important is that just when destroyed by your opponent selects one of their refreshed spirits, remove 3 cores from it, and place it into their reserve. When you combo that with the fact that all of them have curse, and you get the target attack of the level 2 and level 3, this is a insane board control tool that purple can have access to. And then of course, because we know about Rotting Swamp and we're able to just loop serpents back to our hand. And spoiler, we have Black Lance. It is a serpent as well, and it's just like the perfect self-sacrifice target that it now has this very, focused on attacking that truthfully pairs well with green. You'll see in the example list that we put at the end, and I tried to make it as set 3 focused as possible. But if there's a green purple deck that just wants to play, board control, very heavy board control and get value off of it, it's 100% going to be the serpent. So really love this guy. I think it's going to do a lot. It's just super awesome to see the set 1 and 2 serpents get like new life because of this card. And, just building a family archetype deck is just very fun too, and a great way to give the locals to be like, hey, do you like snakes? Here's a snake deck. Here's what it does. So not too much we need to say about Viper Dragon. It lend itself to establishing a new archetype in purple. And that's all I could really ask for. Again, I think that between the two of them, I personally like this one more than Nocturna because of some of the play patterns that it opens up. Obviously, how sick is it to just have a OTK with Meduke? Yes, please, right? Like that could be really fun. But we'll have to wait and see how far that really goes because it is a serpent. You can select one of your opponent's exhausted serpents. If it's bigger than Meduke, you just keep attacking into it because Blood Curse will restand itself, right? Just really cool stuff like that. And again, Meduke's a serpent anyway, so you can protect it with Rotting Swamp if you really have to. And it's all coming together in a beautiful way. So again, I appreciate that. Yes, we do got this brand new awesome X-Rare that brings it all together, but then you're still getting value out of your set 1 and set 2 cards, with Meduke probably being the best thing that you're still doing with it, but Black Lance at least getting even more appreciation because it's drawing you extra cards. It has curse. It's going to KO something, right? Checks all the boxes there. Moving on to the new snakes that we got, and at a high level, I probably should have put these two together. Underworld Snake Man Bodis. I appreciate what they did with the 4-drop and the 5-drop because, again, one, you want to make sure that you're trying to play around Floodstream where you can so your opponent can only remove one thing. And there's a really cute combo with these two cards, but I think you just are better by splashing green into the deck and swapping out the 4 and 5-drop for various exhaust-based effects that are going to kind of do the same thing that you want it to do anyways. So that's something to consider, but I think at least from like a within set 3 design, it is super cool. So this one is going to have curse, which again checks the box sometimes that we just want to have a, suicided into something and makes you have good removal. But then when destroyed by the opponent, remove 1 core from each of your opponent's refreshed spirits and place it into their reserve. So again, you do have to play this mini game of what's standing, what's exhausted, and how many cores people are shifting around. But then it's going to combo into the 5-drop, which we'll talk in just a moment. Speaking about Flood and thinking about what this means from a Lord of the Ground strategy, right? There are 2 snakes. Shadow Snake, I love this one. It's a 2-drop, 1 reduction, very low to the ground, very easy to place. If you control another serpent spirit, draw a card. So it is going to cycle itself, and it does have curse for only 2 cores. So this is going to be one of those premier spirits that you are able to now use it as your control piece thanks to the 6-drop. Slam it into your opponent's spirits, draw it because you're going to have the spirit that allows you to attack into, your opponent's spirits, draw the card, loop it off of Rotting Swamp, discard something else, get it back, next turn, do it again. And as long as you have things like Thorn Prison or Absolute Ice Shield to stall a turn and tap more of their board down, on the very next turn, you can just go, all right, I got 2 or 3 of these now. I'm just going to cycle your entire board, draw a bunch of cards because these cycle themselves, and then draw into other serpents on my following turn, and just board wipe your opponent that way. So it is so important that this does have that loop ability in a Floodstream meta, because otherwise, as the other snake that we're going to talk about, right, you have the Goral Snake for 1-drop, 0 reductions. And yes, super low to the ground, super aggressive if you really want to be, has curse at level 2. And this doesn't replace itself. So like the two of them combined, it's like you just always play the 2-drop, never play this guy, because you want to make sure that you're cycling your deck whenever possible in purple. So I think the 2-drop will see a lot of play. The 1-drop will probably see no play. So nothing much more to say on that. Again, it is a Serpent. If you want to go all in on only having access to set 3 cards, then yes, you're probably playing some number of these, but set 1 and set 2 are cheap enough that you have better options that you can be playing. And then the other one that I want to like bring to, again, going back to the 4-drop, is the Skull Peon combo snake. So when destroyed by opponent, exhaust all of your opponent's spirits with 2 or fewer cores. And then during your attack step, refresh the spirit when one of your opponent's spirits is summoned. So really interesting that it's like, oh, anti, Beldegor or green flash at that regard, and you have a way to tap them down. But as you remember, with the 4-drop, you can strip them all down to 2 cores, or again, fewer, you might just kill some. And then this one, exhaust all your opponent's spirits with 2 or fewer cores. So this really does help you out quite a bit against things like yellow that want to just flood the board and block you out, that now this 2-card combo can completely open up your opponent's board that you can swing through and attack. Again, I think in the context of the set itself and how these combos played off one another, I do absolutely love it. However, that said, as I was building the deck list and as I was going through some of the other cards, it's probably just too much for what you want to be doing. And this one doesn't have Curse, unfortunately, but I think it's still a really neat combo that they put together in the set. But ultimately, I think you're going to end up cutting the 4 and 5 from the majority of the list and just play a much more fair green, purple Serpent list that plays a heavy board control with exhaust combo built in. Moving on to the Pilgrim. And again, I want the Pilgrims to be good. I think they're super flavorful. This is definitely the worst one. And the thing that bothers me about this one in particular, right? All right, let's talk about this one. So it's undead. Okay, that's fine. We know in set 2 that we got a undead archetype, which wasn't fully finished, but, give it a couple cards, it'll get there. Sure, fine, whatever. Pilgrim's undead. We have the Monstrous Mausoleum as a set 2 reference. Cool. When destroyed, discard the top 3 cards of your deck, then select a sanctuary, your Amethyst Sanctuary from it, return it to your hand. Okay, at least it goes to hand, but again, we're milling ourselves. And yes, Nocturna does care somewhat about our graveyard, but very little, as you'll find out when you're actually playing it. And then it costs 6 cores to give this guy Curse. Like, please? Like, what? What is going on? And the Purple Sanctuary, which we'll talk at the end, does lend itself very, very well to the undead archetype. And so I have to ask, why? Why was this made undead? Like, this is another one that it should have just absolutely been Nightling, because you now have this immortal undead strategy, which just does not line up with Nightling whatsoever. Again, I know you can make the very fringe argument about milling, self-mill 3. Ooh, Nocturna has a couple targets again. But you're going to do that naturally as the game progresses, and this just takes up deck slots that it shouldn't. Now, again, for the sake of if I'm building a set 3 deck and I want to introduce the most streamlined as possible deck to locals, yes, you're playing this, you're playing for the Sanctuary, you're playing for Nocturna, you're going to sometimes mill Nightlings with Curse, and it's cool. Otherwise, no, you're just not playing this guy. And I do hope that we see something in set 4 that lends itself even better to the undead archetype. And I get it. Immortal can't be that busted because they don't want to push that as much as, they could. Just getting like a free, Immortal for free on something, for example, even if it's like limited on what numbers it hits, would just be too good, right? Then you're just getting infinite blockers. So it's really interesting, and if not a little bit frustrating, to watch them continue to keep this very balanced, because it just doesn't line up with what you want to be doing with the Nightling archetype. So the red one, at least it goes together, Confront, it's a Dragonoid, it checks all those boxes. Yellow, it has Bless, so it gives you a stabilization. It has the defensive combos well with Blessed Cathedral. That's fine. It works together. And then you have the purple one, which just does not fit. So out of all the Pilgrims, this is definitely the one that upsets me the most, and the one that I think is just, never going to see play with the rest of them. But it's so close to being a flavor win, and it just fell short. So this is the one card that, as many times I try to make it work, and want to put in these different deck lists and try to think about, okay, well, what if we do Nocturna plus Undead? I just wasn't a fan. So enough harping on this card. It's unplayable. Just skip it. Going on from there, we have Dark Knight Bourse, and it is a shadow, so yay, shadow archetype. Yay, Dread Knight Nemesis is a shadow. Yay, we're able to now have a 7-drop immortal cost, but when are you ever really doing that, right? Like, when are you ever just going to sacrifice your nemesis unless it's for the deadly balance trigger and then cool, you're getting this guy back? But like, how often does that realistically happen? How many other Immortal Cost 7 are you playing to make this happen? So cool. I appreciate that this is a very clear addition for the Nemesis archetype. I just overall think it's one that the deck didn't need. So love the artwork. I think it's super sick. I love that they're experimenting more with Immortal in general. It's really cool that you can like deadly balance Nemesis away for full value and then get this back, right? No, otherwise, I just don't think you play a one of, right? Just because, oh, you sometimes get there and it's fine. Otherwise, it's just going to be a skip. Going on from there, we have the Amethyst Sanctuary. And I will say that at first, this was my favorite one. But now as I built this deck and as I saw how much happier I was to put the red Sanctuary Index versus the purple Sanctuary Index, this one's definitely a lot lower on my radar. It is still a cheap early reduction that lines up very well for when you're trying to play things like Blacklands or Meduke early on. But beyond that, the effect leaves a little bit to be desired. So during either attack step, when a spirit is destroyed, view the top card of your deck, discard that card, or return to the top of the deck. So it is filtering for very, very cheap, and it works very, very well with some of the purple Nexus that we're going to be talking about. But ultimately, you're going to be playing this because of Nocturna, and then it does lend itself quite well that you're able to stack up Nocturna triggered turns where you're going to be able to mill a cursed spirit that you want to get back, and that's fine. But I thought this would be much more flexible and have more rooms where it's like, oh, well, now I can just play Impaler Forest, right? Well, chances are you just want to play Impaler Forest more so anyways a lot of the time. But again, from a Sanctuary standpoint, I think it still is one of the better ones. And if you're playing Nocturna, obviously you have to play this anyways. But for the overall viability in purple, this one did just leave a little bit to be desired. And then Palace of the Serpentine Cult. Oh, this one just really hit me in the gut. So we have Rotting Swamp. Draw a card, spirits destroyed during attack, loop serpents, all that's great. This one, when placed, you get a curse or blood curse and put it on top of your deck. Like, it should have just gone to hand. And then during either attack step, when one of your serpent spirits is destroyed, place a core from your opponent's reserve into their trash. So, okay, now we're getting this like random core burn style of effect. So if you have to telegraph this like super hard, or your opponent's always going to expect that it's coming, right? So we talked about that green purple exhaust archetype. So now that there's going to be ways where you exhaust their board, you take all of your serpents, you board wipe them, you're burning a bunch of cores, and then you go in for an attack and hope that they don't have enough cores then left for Absolute Ice Shield. So I think it's like fine for a 1 to 2 of in some cases, because it can be like that haha gotcha. But a lot of times we're already playing Rotting Swamp at 4. You're going to find out there's some other purple Nexus that we just want to play instead. And this card was just like a couple changes away from really being ideal. But ultimately, I think it fell flat. You know, it's awesome that we got a good Nightling archetype and a good Serpent, or at least playable, right, at the local level. Fun to execute the strategies, and then they printed this Nexus, and I'm like, we just have other ones that do it better anyway. So yes, probably still play some number as just like insurance, get your 6-drop snake back, right? That's basically all this card is like insurance to get that guy back at some point. But at the same time, we have a new magic to loop it back instead, which is more versatile if that's the route that we're going to go. And we just want to leave open the Nexus slots for other cards. So ultimately, does feel pretty bad for this Nexus in general, but there are still other Nexus cards that we can play that just kind of, you know, check the boxes we wanted to in both the Serpent archetype and the Nightling archetype. Moving on to Magics, and I love Soul Crush. This is one I am super excited about in core control. 5 costs, 3 reduction, so very easy to play. Main flash, select one of your opponent's spirits without a soul core on it, remove 2 cores from it, and place it into your opponent's reserve. So we know Purple Smoke Valley is making a comeback, right, with set 2 ban, or I should say going into now the lore set ban update, right? That Depths is gone. So Purple does want to go back. We want to look at what other strategies do we have that can still draw a ton of cards, control our opponent's board. Well, it is core control, and Soul Crush does quite a great job at making sure that you're rewarded for those early pip reductions, right? We want to play those early Purple Smoke Valleys and things of that nature. And now Soul Crush can give us that early board control while Purple Smoke Valley is drawing us extra cards. Yes, this does fall off late game when your opponent is just able to have a billion cores, but I think it's still important because it could at the very least be used to power something down and turn off effects in the mid to late game. So I think there's a lot of disconnect between, like, yes, it is still a early game kill spell, but then late game it can be a de-leveler, which can be equally as important. So I'm really curious to see where this one fleshes itself out in the meta. I do think it is very good. A very interesting one is Counter Curse. So 4 cost, 1 reduction, quite expensive, but select one of your opponent's spirits as being blocked by one of your spirits with Curse, destroy it. So it's literally defensive Curse, and I think it's fine in a pinch, but a lot of times you'll find that the purple magic slot is extremely, extremely competitive. So where are we finding room for this ideally? So I appreciate that it's opening up other lines of play for purple, right? Which is otherwise a color that itself struggles quite a bit on defense. And now they did get a good defensive spell. But ultimately, I think a lot of the times you're just going to be wanting to be focusing on either, core control. You're going to want to be focusing on curse and making sure they're forced to block so they don't have a big board that way, right? There's other things that you want to be doing in the various archetypes of purple where this one likely just does not make the cut. But if we do later see more stuff that has Cursed and when destroyed, like Nocturna, right? I get it. They were trying to do more stuff with Nocturna here. That could lend itself to finding a better home. But for now, it does have the neat interaction with Nocturna. So if you really want to, again, build a all-in set 3 deck, that's probably what you're going to be doing. But otherwise, it is going to be a skip for me. And then the one that really was like making me scratch my head was Gather Ingredients, 4 cost, 2 reduction, get a purple spirit back to your hand, right? So we already have Reanimate. Reanimate isn't seeing a lot of play. Yes, it is more limited, but it does give you a 5-drop, and it goes to the summon instead of your hand. So it's like more Beldegor targets, where this one's like, oh, I can get my Nemesis back if I wanted to. So while they play different roles, I think we're still in a spot where purple really doesn't want either one of these yet. I do like Gather Ingredients more so from the undead archetype that, again, just doesn't quite exist yet, because you're able to say like, oh, oopsies, I milled something I care about, and now Gather Ingredients can get it back. Like if you accidentally milled your Nemesis or something, right? Now you can go, okay, well, I got it back because I'm the self-mill deck, and oopsies, I did actually mill the thing I care about. But again, it is only a purple spirit then. So I think it has a home in some deck somewhere. That deck is just not in set 3 by any means. I don't think so. But again, we will be starting set 3 testing very soon, do some videos on it. I did actually get my proxy sheet together, so looking forward to where some of these might end up. And now going into the first drafts of the decks. Again, these are meant to be with as many set 3 cards as possible, just to make it very easy and very streamlined for players to dive into. And the Nightling archetype actually does need to lend itself to getting a couple extra cards of support from the rest of purple. But what I really loved as I was going through this is the Dreadrock Fortress combo. And then I realized like, hey, this is like a different version of core control, but basically close enough to there. And then when I really got into it, I was like, oh, Poison Shot is another card that just allows us to strip cores somewhere. Or if we need our cursed spirits to get through with Purple Smoke Valley, right, at the level 2, we can make our cursed guys unblockable under certain conditions. Like, there's so many cool little combos that you can do with this archetype. This is, I try to make it as new player friendly as possible, but there are actually some pretty insane combos in here that are going to take a little bit of work to pull off. So I'm really excited for this. It is still Nocturna at your top end. You are still going to be trying to bring cursed spirits back, like Black Lance, draw extra cards, Tripedal Bat, just because it is your Nightling with curse, which is then going to give you more value. And of course, we do have Lamorak in here as well, because we do want to get back our purple spirits if our opponent does block, and especially with things like Guinevere, that is now able to attack, kill something. If they block it, you go, okay, Lamorak, thank you, goes back to my hand. Versus if they don't block it, now it's triggering off things like Duke and Fortress. So it creates a situation where it's a, damned if you do, damned if you don't type of blocking situation, which is really fun and could do some cool stuff with purple. So this is one that I want to work on a bit more. The Fled Stream is just a nod to like this deck taking a while to set up, and you don't want to just die to aggro. And Beldegor just being a loop itself, because we do have a 5-drop that we want to be looping as well. Can go the distance, and Beldegor just being a good removal guy, right? So this one, is one that it wants to be there. It just needs a couple more Nightlings to really seal the deal on it. But at least it does lend itself to some pretty fun turns, and Dreadrock Fortress is an absurd nexus, to say the least. And of course, the other deck, I try to keep it, again, more new player friendly, intro level and all that good stuff. I I had to put 4 Thorn Prison in it, which, yes, is going to be expensive, but there should be a lot more green in this list. But once you start mixing colors, it can be very difficult to be, that new player-friendly tag, as I'd mentioned. But we do have this 6-cost Serpent. We do have the OTK with Meduke. I did leave in the 4 and 5 Serpent combo. That combos very well with the 6-drop. So again, you can do like early board setup, 4 into 5 into 6, board wipe your opponent. I don't think it's going to be that good. So again, I think those are the first 2 cuts that you immediately make, and then Lamorak probably comes out as well. And you find some, other cursed spirits you care about, or green spirits that give you tap effects to fill those slots so that you can go in with the 6-drop key spirit, or again, combo it into with Meduke. But overall, it does, allow you to crash into your opponent's spirits, end up tapping down their board. And then things like Dragonaga Assassin being a serpent, getting you to draw extra cards. And then you can also loop it with the Rotting Swamp and the Viper Dragon, letting you target your opponent's spirits. I do love that combo as well. So I'm really curious to see where this one goes the most, but it is one that I think that between the 2 of them, I am personally Team Serpent over Team Nightling, but definitely let me know in the comments below which one that you are more excited to get brewing with. So again, EVA collab news, very, very hype news on that very soon. We do have our set 3 proxies. I just have to figure out, when I'm cutting them up and when I'm going to get new decks put together, record some games, hopefully very soon. And then we are going to be going through the rest of the set review and talk about, I think Nightlings is just slightly behind Serpents, but both of them are really fun, and we'll see where the meta lands itself. So with that, my friends, stay safe, stay hydrated, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.